Welcome to the session on You Can Heal Your Life. It's such an important theme for me, the idea that we can both make the most of ourselves, we can make the most out of our lives, and that we can also heal what holds us back, what stops us from really fulfilling our potential in life. And I think that's one of the two great exciting journeys in life. The journey of giving your gift to the world, of expressing yourself fully and completely into the world, and to fulfilling your potential in life. And that really is one of the most beautiful and enjoyable processes. The more you fulfill your potential, the more fulfilled you will be. The more you give your gift to the world, the more you will feel fulfilled in yourself. And also, the more you give your life calling, your gift to the world, to yourself, the more fulfilled you will be. And then the other side of the coin is, of course, there are things that hold us back. There are wounds, there are difficulties from our childhood, from our early life, or maybe any point in life, traumatic incidents can happen. And those wounds, and there can be transgenerational wounds, wounds in the collective, whether it's through your family lineage or whether it's something to do with the culture or society that you live in. There can be structural, misogyny, structural racism, structural influences that have an impact on how you feel about yourself. So this first session is about bringing healing to those places in ourselves that really need healing, and we're going to explore a prototype model, a prototype approach to the generic principles of healing during the course of this session. That's what we're going to do in this session. And then in the second session, next week's session, we're going to think about an aspect of that, which is the psychological and spiritual resources that enable us to heal. And in some ways, that's almost the most important part. Having the inner resources and also the external resources to help us on our healing journey, so that in the third session, and we bring the two together, we make the most of ourselves. We'll think about what are all the great things about myself, what's my potential, what's my special, unique gift to the world, what's my vision, what are my resources, what are my strengths, what are my abilities, what's the place in the world that is waiting for me to fill it. I believe it's a poetic belief, if you like, that there's a gap in the world waiting for you to fill that gap with your gift to the world. That's how I think about things. And so in that third session, we'll think about that, and we'll also think about how healing our wounds contribute to us giving those gifts to the world, to giving our gift to the world. That healing our wounds, it's not just for the sake of healing the wounds, it's so that we can be more fully expressed, more fully self-expressed in our lives. But there's also something that we'll talk about, which is that in the process of healing your difficulties and your wounds, there's a gift that's available in the process of healing your wounds, which is that through walking the path of healing, you will get deeper wisdom, you will get compassion, and there are all sorts of, particularly wisdom and compassion. You'll have an understanding of yourself and life that you wouldn't have got if you hadn't been wounded in the first place. So that's the sort of the good news about woundedness or difficulty, that if you do your process of healing, if you go through that process, then the journey that you went through to have that healing becomes a part of your gift. And in fact, what happens is that in the end, your life calling and the gift from your life calling is supported by the gift of your woundedness. And so my example is that, my mother was a frontline ambulance driver in the Second World War. She won medals, the top French medals for rescuing people under fire. She came back from the war with post-traumatic stress syndrome, and she wasn't really able to show love to her children. And the first two kids were my twin brother and I. And we competed all the time for love. We didn't really love each other because we were competing for this limited resource of care and of love. And when we got to about the age of 16, I realized that I was, we were really messed up. And I started to look at personal development. In fact, my first book was on witchcraft, but I didn't stay with witchcraft for very long. But, what is it that can support me in having the life I want and becoming who I want to become? My twin brother went towards drugs and became a heroin addict. And at the age of 42, he died of a heroin overdose. But quite early on in my 20s, I realized that there was nothing I could do to help him. And in fact, one of my therapists said to me, the only person in the world that you can't help is your twin brother, because you're too close to him. You can't see the toxic structures in the family system. And so I went through a journey of personal development, and I became I did a lot of my own work. I became a psychotherapist. I became an executive coach. I did a lot of different types of modalities and workshops. I spent 20 years with a Buddhist master. I've done other non-dual type of spiritual practices. I'm in a group on awareness at the moment. I really focused on my own development. And one thing that I can say is that my ability to support people comes from the difficulty of my own journey. I had a funny moment on my website the other day because, I'm 65. I know I don't look like 65, or perhaps I do, but I'm 65. I've actually been doing personal development for 50 years. And I was looking at my website and it says I've been doing personal development for 40 years. And I thought, do I really want to say I've been doing it for 50 years? It just seems like such a long time. People will think that I'm 90 years old or something like that. So what I bring, so the gift of my woundedness is that I've been really had to work hard with my own development for 50 years. And therefore, I'm really have confidence and relaxation and skill and knowledge and ability and compassion for the people that I work with. That's now become a part of my gift. My life calling is helping people blossom. Now, that sounds, very New Age, very Californian, until you think about my family background and you think about the fact that my twin brother died. So, that helping people blossom comes from a very deep place in myself. And for my own survival. And you can see how that's supported by the journey that I've had to go through in my own healing. I'm not just hey, let's all blossom. I've had to really do the hard spade work, the hard digging in my own personal journey. And then some of you know this, but a few years ago when I was teaching in China, everybody was in an exercise. I was watching the group and sort of just thinking about life. And my brother came to mind. I imagined my brother was in the room with me. And then I remembered that when I was in psychotherapy and the psychotherapist said to me, the one person in the world you can't help is your brother, I'd made an inner vow that if I couldn't help my brother, I'd help other people. And that hopefully, in a poetic way, other people in the world would help my brother. And many people did help my brother. But he still died. And so then I had this feeling of a really warm, positive feeling that giving my gift to the world was also giving something on behalf of my brother. My gift wouldn't be so strong if it hadn't been not only for my own process, but also for my brother's process. And so there you can see how all of that comes together. My own woundedness and my life calling, but also, you can look at my brother's life and say, what a wasted life. And there were some great things he did in his life, but also I'm still, as a result of my relationship with him, I'm still giving gifts on his behalf as well as my own. So that sort of gives you a sense of how all of this fits together. So in the session today, we're going to focus particularly on healing the wounds. And it's such a beautiful, loving process to learn to bring love to the place in yourself that is wounded, to become the healer for yourself. But in the process of becoming a healer for ourselves, we often need coaches or therapists, and also friends, and people in our Sangha or community who can see us and say yes. The lack of, very often the lack of care, or the lack, the invisibility, or the lack of tenderness or love that we received earlier in life, wherever it was, whether it was as a child or as an adult, that can be healed firstly by other people saying, yes, I see you, yes, I care about you, yes, I believe in you, yes, what happened was awful, yes, you're accepted, yes, your wounds are visible. And secondly, through hearing that from and feeling that from people around you, to then be able to start to do that for yourself. And one of the big secrets of the healing process is that very often we've become our own enemy. We hate the place, or we're really frustrated with the place that's wounded. And we can understand why. If you've got some early life wound and you've been struggling with it all your life and you haven't been able to change it, you may be pissed off about it. That's totally understandable. But being pissed off with it doesn't help. And so very often the therapist, the coach, or the really good friend, or the peer group member in a group coaching process, their tenderness, their curiosity, their interest, their care, their welcoming of that place in you that's wounded, just the welcoming, without any fancy techniques, just the saying, I hear this, I see this, I get this, just that is a healing process in itself. That may be the most important part of the healing process. Just for that place in you to be seen and heard and experienced and held in the world. And then there are other things that can be done on top of that. But I really want to emphasize this element. I've seen healing taking place where all that I've done, or the practitioner has done, is just accept and welcome a voice or an element of yourself that hasn't been welcomed, that hasn't been cared for. The exiled self. And of course, it reminds me of the story of the prodigal son in the Bible. Not that I'm a Christian, but the prodigal son who disappears from the family, doesn't get involved in the family business. In the end, I can't quite remember the story, but comes back lost and hopeless. And the father comes out and welcomes him on the road, and then says, I'll create a great feast for you. That when you welcome back the exiled places in yourself, that itself is massively healing. But often we need to do that in relationship. We've got a world in which we think that we can do everything for ourselves, that we need to be independent. But we're not. Humans are only, advanced mammals. We're only advanced primates. We're relationship creatures. We heal in relationship. And so the relationship with people who are in a healing field with you, whether it's an individual or a group, can then help you build that relationship with yourself. And so that's really the topic of today. And really what I want to emphasize today, I've talked a little bit about the theory, and I'll talk a little bit more about it, but I really want to just emphasize the importance of the warm, tender heart. It's really the critical part. So the warm, tender heart, and I've talked a bit about your external resources, having people who say, yes, I hear this in you, I see this in you, I get that you feel like this. And then the inner resources, who are the people in your history that have seen you and believed in your life? Who are the storybook characters who you really connected with, who can be archetypal forms? is there a relationship that you have with nature, Mother Nature, that helps you believe in yourself? And do you have spiritual resources, a spiritual connection that you can expand, that you can, if you have a thread, a spiritual thread that then can become something more, a way of feeling that spiritual forces see you, believe in you, and support you. And though, so we'll spend time on resources both today and on the next occasion. I really prefer these groups if people have their cameras on, particularly because we will go into breakout rooms at some point. So if possible, I'd like to ask Jen and Sheila to turn your cameras on. Usually, people will know that, in the end, if people are, not coming with cameras, I ask them not to come actually, but if you've got a bad line or something of that sort, one of the things I try to do with these groups is to replicate as closely as possible what it's like in the online trainings that I do, where we really create intimate connection with each other. Great to see you, Sheila. Great to have you here today. I think she's in California, so she may be having her breakfast or something like that. So thanks for turning your cameras on. It also helps me feel more connected because I'm a relational person. And so we've got this very strange world now, haven't we, of Zoom and internet and the internet. But it supports me running a good workshop with you, to look at your faces, to look around at the screen and to feel you and to sense you and to feel connected. And the great mystery of being human, this fantastic thing we have called awareness, allows me to some degree, not as much as face to face, but to quite a high degree, to feel you through the medium of this, this camera screen, this laptop screen, and the internet, and yours, and then the information that at an unconscious level goes back and forth between us. It's just absolutely amazing. So that's what I'm wanting to create. And also, of course, that feeling of connection is the healing force. I'm not here to do a theoretical lecture. If for us to have healing today, we need to feel connected with each other, and not just with ourselves. And therefore, our attentiveness is really, important. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit more about the healing process. Then I'm going to lead a very short meditation. But what I want you to see is I want you to see me demonstrating the healing process with someone in this group. Because I want you to get the feeling for that. I know that some of you have worked with people like Steve Gilligan and Robert Dilts and maybe Malcolm Stern. There are other people that you may have worked with. There's something, the most crucial part of the healing process is the empathic connection between the coach or the therapist and the client. And the only trouble with following one psychological or spiritual teacher is you only get to see it done one way. Actually, there are multiple ways of connecting with people, working with people. But the thing that all the good practitioners have, and by the way, this is evidence-based, is that what makes the difference in healing is one of the key components is the connection between the practitioner and the client, the emotional connection. And secondly, that it's somatic, that it engages the emotions in the body. It's not just head talk. And that for me, there's something very, very beautiful, not just about, sort of the first step often is the practitioner or the coach working with you. But really then, and that supports you building that inner connection with yourself. So really the second step is building that inner connection with yourself. But another dimension of this is that where we want to get to is to be in groups of people who have enough emotional intelligence, listening skill, empathy skill, understanding of when to give advice and when just to listen. And by the way, listening is much more important than giving advice. That we can surround ourselves on a daily, weekly basis with people who really get us, and we can say, "Hey, my old wound was touched today." I can call a friend, and say, "Hey, this is what happened. It touched my history in some way." The more we can include all of ourselves in our life, the better. And that means, it's sort of easy, or the Brits are very good at putting themselves down, but it is easier to talk about what's great about yourself, your life calling, your strength, your resources, your vision. But to also have space in your life to talk about places which are sensitive, that are vulnerable, that can get touched, and not to feel shame about it. Not to feel shame that from my childhood I learned that I was unlovable. That doesn't mean I am unlovable. It means that place in me can be touched, that there's an old memory that can get touched. And mostly I've transformed it. But that's not something to be ashamed about. And I just want to talk about, I think most people here are quite experienced, so I won't spend a long time on this. Or, you've had psychological training. But just that, the wound could be a traumatic incident, a car crash or a natural disaster, or it could be something that's repeated, domestic violence or a family violence, or alcoholic behavior, or put down, or disempowering things. I think sometimes people think that if some really terrible thing happened, that's the worst. But actually, I think that sort of the worst can be the drip, drip, drip of toxic contact over long periods of time, small amounts of toxic contact repeated again and again and again. And of course, where we get that, generally, we get it, the worst place to get that is in your childhood, in a way. That's very powerful. You could get it in an organization where you had your first boss was difficult, or misogynist culture, or racist culture, for example, spending a lot of time in that. But that drip, drip, drip is very, very toxic. The small stuff can be more toxic than the dramatic stuff. Just to be aware of that. Because sometimes people say, I wasn't raped, so therefore, who am I to complain? But actually, you could complain just as much. Each of us are affected by our own experience in our own individual way. So however you were affected is how you were affected. And that is not more or less than how anybody else was affected. And so then, of course you get sort of not only the drip, 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 but they call it complex trauma, but you could call it complex woundedness, which is when lots of different elements in a toxic family system impact you. So my mother was disassociated from her feelings and didn't connect with us emotionally. And my father had business problems and was absent, so he was emotionally absent and physically absent a lot of the time. And then there were other things in the system as well. My father was alcoholic. One of the worst forms of wounding is neglect. You don't, when somebody tells a story about being beaten up by their parent, someone I know sort of talks about, he beat us by day and he beat my mother by night. Those horrific stories. But actually not being seen, not being visible, not being neglected, it can be just as bad. When I was like 7, I ran away from home, but nobody noticed. I had to come back when I was hungry. What does a 7-year-old do? And nobody had noticed. So that neglect, not being seen, not being heard, not having a place. I talked to someone today who was, the 4th or 5th of their parents' priorities, of which work was the first. So really having a good understanding, a compassionate, loving, curious understanding of how we were wounded is really, really helpful. So if I walk down the street, somebody's rude to me, I'm annoyed for a minute, and but I recover half an hour later. That's great. I don't need to spend a lot of time exploring it. The way you know that you need to do healing work is when it follows you around through through the years and the decades. That's when you know you need to turn around and face it. Something's wounded you and it's still bothering you. If it's a small thing, you may need to turn around and face it the next day or the same day. Or you may say, something's been following me since I was 5 years old. Maybe I need to actually face it. Very often saying, a lot of the time you can just say, oh, that person's having a hard day, I won't let it bother me. And that can work. But when you notice that it has been bothering you, then you need to turn around and deal with it directly. And of course, physical violence, family violence, sexual violence, being ignored, disempowering messages, you're not lovable, you're not good enough. All of those sorts of things can affect you. And by the, psychologically, we focus a lot on things that happened from conception nowadays, right through to, late teenage years, because those early years have the biggest impact on our lives. But of course, a marriage which is very disempowering, or where the person gaslighted or cheated in a way that was, underhand, that you couldn't be seen, can also have dramatic effect, So things can happen at any stage in our lives, but it's really very often when somebody says they've been, something that's happened in their adult life has wounded them, quite often there will be a vulnerability that was there from their childhood as well. So we don't always look to the first thing that comes to mind, but maybe there's something else as well. And just having curiosity about it, loving curiosity. So what we're going to do today is we're just going to access resources and bring loving curiosity to ourselves without necessarily trying to do anything except to bring love. We're not going to try and, sort something out. Very often the tendency to try and change something is actually the thing that stops the healing from happening. When you just bring tenderness and compassion, the place can heal of its own accord. It's like letting the unconscious, letting the body be the agent of healing, with the support of your conscious mind and the support of practitioners and friends and people who see you. Then the healing naturally takes place. So I think of my job as being like a gardener. I want to help the plant have the right place in the garden and get watered and have the sun, and perhaps out of the way of the wind, and sometimes you have to put a little netting around the base of the plant to stop the rabbits eating it, but it's the plant that does the growing. So the sun that we're referring to here is the warm, tender heart. It's the caring heart that sees and says yes to whatever experience you had, and says there's no shame in that. There's no shame in there may be shame for the other people involved. They may need to feel shame, but you, as the victim of, of lack of care, whether it's abusive or just plain neglect. A child is born innocent, sweetly innocent. You started innocent with no shame at all. And then if you acquired shame, it was acquired along the way through the actions of carers or people, if you were, carers if you were very young, who allowed something to become shameful that wasn't your responsibility. So particularly from early life, if you have any shame from early life, that's something that is not yours. It's the shame of another person. So a lot of talk about this. So what I'd like to do is to just briefly go into a meditation. And so make yourselves comfortable. I'm not going to do a very formal structure. And by the way, Marina's turned her camera off. When sometimes people in meditations prefer not, to turn the camera off and not to be visible. It's helpful for me if people keep their cameras on, but for you it's okay if you want to turn the camera off for the meditation process, if it helps you feel just more with yourself. And so the first step is always to get the body-mind engagement. The healing needs to take place in your emotional body, and therefore you need to have more of your emotional body and your somatic self engaged and present. And so I always just pay attention to what I see, what I hear, and what I feel. The other thing you want to do is, just broaden your awareness so that you're not just in your internal dialogue. There's nothing wrong with your inner voice. It just takes up too much space sometimes. So, just to be aware of what you see, hear and feel, and particularly what you feel in your body. And breathing is always a good place to put your attention. And something that's really helpful in addition to just having a sense of your body, what you hear, what you see, that body-mind connected state, can be what some people call a generative state or creative mind state. A state in which you feel whatever it is that you know to help you feel really connected with yourself or connected with life. Whether it's remembering a time when you felt that, or some ritual you have that helps you really connect with all the levels of being and also all the breadth of resources of the universe, of life. Whatever it is that gets you into that centered place. I'd like you to bring in inner resources that you have that will really support you in any healing that needs to happen in your life. So, people who have really believed in you or seen you, cared about you, or loved you. And you may already have what I call a circle of supporters, a circle of people and archetypal forms, figures. Or this may be new to you and you just have one person in your mind. And it's important with each, whether you have one or more, to see them, to hear the words, the tone of voice they might use with you, and to feel in your belly, in your guts, in your body, their support. And this could be someone who's currently in your life, or someone from your past, or it could be a spiritual figure, an archetypal form. Or a character from a movie, or a comic book, or a childhood book. Or someone whose work you deeply respect, whether it's Nelson Mandela or Milton Erickson. And just really enjoying their presence. And if you have one of these, that's great. And if you have more, that's great. And really a strong recommendation is to keep developing your relationship with this circle of supporters over time. I talk to mine every single day. Every day I talk to them. I have a rendezvous with them. And I include more and more people. I have a 5.5-year-old boy who's in my circle. I have a dog. And particularly today, we want those resources that would support you in healing, that would bring love to your heart. Both people who would just really, who believe in you, who really, really love you. Whether it was a teacher who just fully believed in you. Or whether there's some sort of spiritual healing power that you can call on, that you have access to, that you've built a relationship with. So particularly for today, what are the resources that if you felt their support fully, would help you heal your life? You know, maybe you need something big. You know, if you're doing work in the world that is really helping the world, maybe Mother Earth can be there for you. Maybe the central forces of your spiritual practice can be there. Maybe your ancestors. Maybe, you know, as they say in councils of circle and also Extinction Rebellion and other places, you know, the children of 100 generations in the future, maybe they need to be there to support you in your healing journey, the future of this world. And then with this support, ask yourself, what element of myself, what part of myself do I really want to heal, has come for healing? Not just in today's session, it's a 2-hour session, you have to be realistic, but what could we start today that could be something that's important for me in 2022? What's the healing? What needs to be healed in me in 2022? What's here now for healing? And just to have curiosity and interest, and also just one little step at a time. like not to be in a hurry, and to have some dialogue between that intention of what needs healing and the resources, the spiritual and psychological resources that support you. You know, perhaps you have a wise man or woman, a therapist or group leader here supporting you. It's like helping you get this intention clear. Here's something that's now come for healing in my life. And now's the time. And I also just want to mention transgenerational trauma, and that there may be things that are not really to do with your life that you have in your body, from your culture, from your family history, from the history of the world. I was born after the Second World War, but I carry in my body a lot of stuff from the Second World War. What's the history that you carry from your culture that may need to be healed more fully? And just inviting in the most powerful resources available. It's my guess that everyone here is seeking to make a difference in the world as a human being. So maybe life itself is one of your resources. If the planet is going through some initiation where we could fail or we could succeed, and you are one of the forces that is seeking to support life going to the next level, maybe life itself, or however you want to frame it, is a resource that's interested in your healing journey. And so with these resources, with these supporters, and with this intention, how can you bring the heart quality, the interest, the concern, the wisdom of these resources first into your own heart, to feel it in your own heart? And then through your own heart to bring this love, this concern, this wisdom to any place in your body that feels pain, where this history resides, where the wounding resides, where in your body is the feeling. And just to really bring this interest, it could be like a spotlight, like a feeling, like honey flowing, like a caring voice into your chest, your solar plexus, your belly, your lower belly, perhaps your sex, anywhere in your body that needs, your throat, that needs this seeing, this curiosity, this love, this interest. We're not trying to change anything, we're just trying to say, I hear you, I see you, I get you, I get how difficult this was. You're welcome. I want to know you better. I want to welcome you. I want to be tender with you. Just bringing that, but all the while staying connected with your circle of supporters. There's a balance about not falling so far into the feeling that you lose connection with your circle of supporters, but not being so just in the resources that you can't feel what's happening in your body, where in your body needs to be touched, or where in your history needs to be touched. The fastest, most powerful way is to go directly to the feelings in the body, but a good way into that can sometimes be to imagine the time when something happened and to flood that with healing light, warm-hearted tenderness, curiosity, gentleness. It's almost like a magic dust that one could just sprinkle through the historical memories, seeds of healing, little handfuls of light. But always making sure that you stay connected with the healing powers, the healing resources. And there's some sort of weaving of the resources with the place that was wounded. Perhaps it's just a feeling, a soothing feeling that hugs or cuddles or touches that place and brings healing through touch. Or perhaps there's a conversation with a gentle voice. Just saying welcome. Or perhaps something needs to be said like wasn't your fault. Your carers were wounded, your parents were wounded, or this wasn't about you, this was about them. And all of these different methods can be used over a period of time to become, one metaphor is to become the best parent, healing guide, the best healer and best friend of the younger you, to talk to guide, to explain, to coach. Perhaps the 5-year-old in you needs to know something that only the adult knows, or the 2-year-old. And before you were verbal, maybe you just need the warm-hearted adult you to hold your gaze and say, yes, I see you. Or maybe we need to send energy back to the womb, to when we were in the womb. All the way back to the time that it's needed. Maybe your mother was carrying difficult things from the culture in her body, and in the womb you felt the stress. You felt You were flooded with her hormones. And this is just the start of, this could be just the start of a process. Maybe today you'll say, oh, that was great, I've done it. But most people will probably need to come at it in different ways over time. With the deep healing processes, taking time over it is good. One sip at a time. Bringing healing to it without getting lost in it. Take a sip, step back to the resources. Take a step back to the resources. If you found something that is really worth healing, and that you're in the process of healing it, imagine continuing this journey of healing it in the future. Finding other times and other places, perhaps during 2022, to continue this healing. And perhaps, if this is really helpful to you, you can find time every day, even for 5 minutes, to speak to the resources, to remember your intention to heal, and to bring some of this honey, this light, this feeling, this touch, these words, to the places in you that need healing. And sometimes, if that place in you has been exiled, neglected, you may have to come back to that place in you 30 times and say yes, before that place in you begins to believe that it isn't a one-off. The place in you that's exiled, that has been, may need some regular attention for it to feel that it's held by you compassionately and safely. And therefore 5 minutes every day might be really useful for a period of time. And only you will know whether it's 5 minutes a day or longer, or whether you want support from peer group practitioners, or to join a group, or to do one-to-one work. But it's good to just have a sense of how your healing journey can progress in the future. So, when you're ready, I want you to just gently reorientate to the screen, staying deeply connected in yourself. We're not going to go into groups straight away, so you don't need to worry about that. We're going to stay, I'm going to do a little work with one or more people in the group. And what's really interesting is that in watching me interact with somebody, that that can also touch places in yourself that need to be touched. So it's really great to stay connected with yourself and also stay connected with the group, with the field. I think if you look around at the screen, you can see that everyone's touched. And that to stay with that sense. That feeling of heart connectedness that many people here feel. Who would like to share a little and have me do a little work with you? Help you take it deeper. Okay, Albric. Yeah. Yeah, speak, Albric.
Hi there. Hello, everyone. There's so many, so many pearls of wisdom in
Forget
this
my pearls
last.
of wisdoms. Talk about what you have for yourself. What do you have? How are you touched right now?
Um, this notion that there are parts that needs to be healed. I've done this kind of work previously, so I'm familiar. It's just this time the chord that was struck had to do with there was a moment that I was thinking, maybe the part doesn't want to be healed. Maybe it's too fast. Maybe all it wants is just for someone to listen to the story of where
Yes,
I came from, no?
yes.
And at that moment, literally a second later, you said, we're not here to change it or to change the feeling, the wound. We're just here to say, I see you, I hear you. And it's like, ha, did he hear me? Like, did you telepathically, hear me? Because it came literally a second later, which was the greatest thing to the gift to be given, which is just sit with it. Just don't rush into changing it, which is
Yeah.
something I've tried to do in the way I've attended to these wounded parts. It's like, let's see if we could change you.
What is the wounded? Tell us what the wound. Tell us.
Uh,
Tell us. Let the to the extent to which it's safe. Let the wounded
yeah.
speak to us.
I think it's a familiar sort of story. In the sense that we all come. So I was born and raised in Iran into an Armenian family, into a Christian Armenian family in a Muslim country. And I was the second child, middle child, basically. And so I always had this older brother, 6 years older than me, that was like sort of like uh, perfect. He was everything about him was perfect. Like he was a great student. He was a everything was good, and I was compared to him. Not or maybe it was a feeling that I developed that, for example, I can't be like him, so I need to be something else, and I decided to be a bit rebellious instead of being just too nice of a guy that he was.
Can I ask you to stop for a second
Yeah.
and just feel into your body right now?
So that's what I try to avoid because my body generates panic.
Yeah.
Panic.
Okay. So feel the panic. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
Hmm.
So what resources did you get in the meditation?
So you talked about a 5.5-year-old. I have a 5.5-year-old. It is my nephew's son. When he comes here, he runs to
No,
me.
yeah, no talking. Stop. We're
Ah,
going to stop your talking. Talking is taking you away from it. So just see
it's
the 5.5-year-old,
mm-hmm.
feel his warm feeling, and then bring that warm feeling to your body. How is that? Just do it for a short amount of time. How is that?
It's good. It's an expansive feeling. It's a feeling of joy, uh, feeling of being seen, because that's how he. Yeah.
And how is the panic? There's a place in you that panics, and it's welcome right now. You don't need to feel it very strongly. I think you might have felt it strongly enough. You can step back from it a little. So you just want to take little tastes of it. So you want to stay with the resources. So if 5 is a comfortable, if 0 is no feeling of no panic at all, and 5 is feeling it at a comfortable level, and 10 is feeling it much too much, it's really extreme, where would you say you are?
Yeah, between 5 or 6. It's I'm comfortable here now because you're one of my resources, so you're here. But that part says, what happens when we turn the Zoom off.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then my sister calls me crying because she needs my help. My brother needs my help. My parents need my help.
Unplug the phone.
Yeah. This darn thing doesn't have plugs anymore. That's the problem.
Turn it off. Put it on silent. So taking time, and what I hear right now is that the panic is saying, I need time and support for me. I need time and support for me. I don't need my brother, my mother, my sister calling me. I need support. I need support. So let's just stay with I need support. Breathe a little more.
There's a lot of guilt.
A lot of guilt, yeah. So the guilt is welcome. Wherever that guilt is always, I'm suspicious of guilt, but the guilt is welcome. Who's said you should always support everyone else? It's like, but here is the guilt. Guilt is welcome. But the guilt is usually a sign that you were asked something that was inappropriate. A young kid is not meant to be looking after their brother, their sister, their parents. That's not the job of a young kid. And panic is saying it's too much, it's too much, it's too much. Panic is welcome. Panic is here to tell you it's too much. How is that? How does that feel? We're not trying to change anything, by the way.
No, that was good. The guilt usually overpowers. I think when you said it's welcome, it's sort of like, oh, okay, you got, like the guilt was seen, so it didn't have to overpower.
Yeah. So the thing with guilt is that it's not a proper emotion. It's a feeling of, it's a sort of thought that you should be doing something because other people expect you to do it. And it's at what age? When did the guilt start? How old were you?
Oh, I remember one of the memories that keeps coming back. I think I'm 8 years old. We're driving to my uncle's house and we're passing through this shanty town. And I'm in my, we're in a taxi and I'm sitting by the window, and I look and I see little kids playing in mud and dirt, and I remember making eye to eye contact with one of these little kids, It was literally his hands were in the mud and he was playing in the mud. And meanwhile, I'm driving from a nice neighborhood to another
You
nice.
the story is keep telling the story, but make it short.
That's it.
And what did you feel guilty about?
That how is it that this one is
Yeah.
um,
Well, why do you feel guilty about your sister calling? Or
no, if I don't answer, you said turn
yeah,
unplug.
yeah. Why do you have
That's
to answer your sister?
she's alone. She's gone through a divorce and she hasn't gotten back on her feet yet.
And yeah, and why do you have to pick the phone up?
There's no one else to help her.
And why do you have to pick the phone up for your brother?
He's he's in the sort of early stages of Alzheimer, and he's beginning to forget us. And if I don't answer him,
Yeah.
he
And
may
why do you
not
have to
call
pick
me
the phone
next
up for
time.
you? Is it your mother or your father? I can't remember.
Both of them, they both.
Because there's a real difference between wanting to pick the phone up and feeling guilty about it. There's a real difference. And the panic, there's something that's not balanced. So we're not trying to change anything, but the panic is here to say, oh, is to give you a message. What's the message that the panic is giving you? What is it telling you?
It's sort of twofold message. One message is when you were speaking earlier, like I haven't lived my purpose.
Mm.
I haven't given myself to the world yet. I've just tried to accumulate knowledge and knowledge and knowledge and knowledge. And then the other side of the coin is the panic is I'm not attending to that. Instead, I'm constantly being like the floodgate opens on daily basis, every other day basis, and then I have like there's all these people who are close to me, and they need my help. They need my
Yes, let's stop. Yeah, let's. You're talking yourself into it. So your skin is paler, and your breath has changed. So go back to the psychological, which is the most powerful of the psychological resources.
most powerful is this person in the faith that we practice in my house.
Yeah. The faith. You mean like a saint or?
Yeah, he's the son of the prophet founder of the faith that we follow. Yeah.
So can you see him?
Yeah, I have his picture. We have his picture.
See him in your mind's eye. And hear, perhaps hear his words. And then, how does he support you in relation to this panic? Just feel that. Don't verbalize it. But just feel his support. Breathe that support into your body. I don't know whether it's a light from his heart or a feeling that comes through his body that you can feel in your body, or that it's his words that touch you gently. Just what does he say? Or what's the feeling that you get from him?
I had him sit next to me on a bench, and he looks into my eyes. He has this beautiful blue eyes, old man, and he says, "Trust that you're safe."
Yeah. He says, trust that you're safe. And then, is there a question that you have in response to him? Can you just trust that you're safe, or do you need to ask him something else?
I ask him, how do I trust? And he says, remember me, remember my face in front of your face.
Yeah. So right now, see his face in front of your face. And explore the combination. Is it just seeing his face? Or is it hearing his voice? And is it feeling his heart?
Mm.
Just explore what makes it really powerful, what makes it really safe.
Yeah, those three. And the other thing that really helped and made it more concrete was to walk with him.
Mm.
One of the advice, yeah, he gave me an advice that, we have a saying in Farsi that says, once you move, providence comes.
Yes.
And that's he's he says, trust me, it is true. Once you move, providence will come.
Mm. So just imagine, and how are you feeling right now? If naught is very full of panic, 10 is very relaxed. Where are you now?
8.
8. Great. So just stay with that. Stay with this feeling. Stay with his face. Stay with his words. Stay with his heart. When you move, providence comes. Just imagine yourself, after this call, staying with him. If you move around the house, he comes with you. If you walk on the street, he comes with you. You can talk to him anywhere. You can be with him anytime. I have my guides come in my sleep. If I wake at night, I talk to them, they talk to me. And we can just practice you can practice keeping him in the room, talking to him, feeling him, being close with him. You can become his disciple every day, every minute. Bring this into your body, allowing healing to take place today, tomorrow, over the next period in time. Perhaps he will take you to people and places where more healing can happen, where the guilt can be unraveled. And one of the funny things in life is that if I feel I have to take care of somebody, my heart doesn't feel good. But when I'm feeling really nourished, I have plenty to give. So sometimes the order has to be changed a little. That you feel his support, you feel his support, you feel the nourishment. He leads you to other support and nourishment in your life. And then you get really full of nourishment and support. And then out of that, there's space for you that you feel, oh, I'm feeling great. I want to support my sister, my brother, my parents. But how can we allow this little boy to feel support? To bring love and support to this little boy, to welcome this little boy who felt so guilty. It's so sweet, a little boy looking out of a car window, seeing someone so much in poverty playing in the mud. Totally understand why he would feel guilty, but actually you need to have your own heart and your own life and your own nourishment if you want to help other people. You need to be okay. What ways might you continue to support yourself during the days that come?
I think walking. I think I'll go for walks with my resources, but this particular one in mind. We'll go for walks together.
Great. Do you pray to him?
I do, but I think I'm going to pray to him a little bit more earnestly.
Great. I pray to my teacher every day.
Mm.
And I light candles. The more I lean in, the more you lean in, the more I lean in to that relationship, the more I get back. I know there's a mystic, Christian mystic actually, who talks about he has a rendezvous with God every day. He has a date with God every day. Have a date with your teacher.
Mm.
You know, the more you put into that relationship, the more you'll get back from it.
I've been waiting to hear that from someone else besides me. I thank you for that.
Sure. So you're in quite a tender place right now. How are you? I mean, emotionally, how are you feeling right now?
I'm good. I feel supported. I feel seen, heard. Yeah.
Good is not an emotion.
Mm.
So what would you say? You sad, happy, vulnerable, angry? What would be the physical sensation that you would have in your body right now? What's the physical feeling?
Contained in my body.
Right, great, beautiful. Holding.
Embodied,
great.
Mm.
Beautiful. Albrecht, thank you for doing this. I wish we could spend more time, but we've only got a short amount of time. I'd like to, everybody come back on the screen to gallery view in case you haven't got it, so you can see everybody. And let's just give some appreciation to Albrecht. Either hand gesture, or you could say a word or two. If you have a word to say to Albrecht, if you were touched, you can speak. Yeah, that's nice. I like it that it's quiet because, you know, I don't like doing the rah 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 thing. But has anybody got a word for Albrecht to say something to him?
I have.
Great.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for your beauty. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you.
Thank you for your authenticity. Really appreciate you sharing this part of yourself along your journey.
I see a beautiful change. It's like nakedness. Thank you.
Okay, we could share more, but actually what I want to do is I want to have you just debrief a little bit, just for a short amount of time. It'll be 7 minutes per person in groups of 3, 5 minutes per person in groups of 4. And so there's two things. How were you touched by Albrecht's work? But more importantly, how did that touch your story? Did it touch your story and your history? How did it touch your life? And that's so as much rather than don't spend a lot of time talking about Albrecht. Talk about yourself. And I ask the other people in the group, if they start talking about Albrecht or they start talking theoretically, gently bring them back to talking about what is my experience during that demo. What is my experience in the meditation? What is my experience right now? So the two, in a group of 3 or 4, the other people are there to just gently bring you back from theory to personal, and from talking about someone else to talking about yourself, but just very, very gently. And if someone really, all they can do is be intellectualized, don't fight them on it. Just hold them where they are. So it's an invitation to talk from yourself rather than from theory or from impersonal or intellect. But if the person is really, all they can manage is to talk from theory, then just hold them where they are. So we're going to have groups of 4 or 3, we'll see. I will do the timing for the groups of 4. The groups of 3 will have to do their own timing. And let me just see. Oh, let me just see. Great. Okay, just taking a look. So 20 minutes in total, starting now. So we're going to be back at 5:50 London time, and but I'll do the timing for the groups of 4. Starting now. Great. Great. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. I always get a little worried with some of the small groups if they're different, people of different experiences. So hopefully you had a good experience. If yours was more difficult, just be curious about how you were touched, and also be curious about what was going on for the other person if they didn't seem very connected. I think one of the things from this work is to really get that if someone's very defended or disassociated, that's a sign of trauma. That's how their trauma is showing in themselves. Some people can talk about what's going on and talk about their feelings and talk about what's in the body, and other people find it much, much more difficult, and that's just a sign of their trauma. Any comments or questions? From this exercise or from your experience? Or sharing of how you were touched. And don't speak just because you feel nobody else has spoken, because that's not a good reason to speak. Sheila. Welcome.
I really appreciate the groups because to me, that's when it gets like integrated.
Yeah.
Because we talk about it, and then when we have enough time and you find a little commonality and you connect and you go a little bit deeper. And I just want to say that I just appreciate that. Just
Thank
the
you.
chance to do the group and connect at a more intimate level.
Yeah. No, I really agree with you, Sheila. Today, somehow, I think my introduction was quite long. There's some feedback going on. I'm just going to mute you for a second. I've muted you, Sheila, just because I think there was feedback happening through your computer. But no, I really appreciate you saying that. Actually, I planned to spend longer in the small groups, but I think I took longer in my introduction, and so slightly ran out of time. Normally, what I would do is I would do a longer demonstration working with somebody, and then I would have you between half an hour and 45 minutes, either in pairs or groups of three, on the longer courses. It's really great you do the demo, you teach the method, and then you take each other through the method. And it's really great because when you lead someone else through an exercise, through a process, you're actually also teaching it to yourself. You're taking yourself through it. And so actually, Sheila and I, we both work with someone we really both like a lot, which is Steve Gilligan. And Steve Gilligan, he's so great, but I don't often think, actually I shouldn't say this, but I don't think he gives enough time to the small group process and the exercises. And one of the things that just seems really important to me, I mean, I think he's brilliant, I love his work, is really to take time to do the processes with each other, to share from our hearts deeply with each other, and to be seen and witnessed by each other. And we didn't really get as much of that today as I would have liked, but we got a little taste of it. So I think one of the things about ongoing groups that is really important about ongoing groups is to get to a depth of connection with all the members of the field, all the participants, but particularly also in the small groups, where you really just feel so completely safe that you can talk about anything, and that you're welcomed in it. And that's the sort of the major technique. Sometimes, with these open classes, sometimes you get people, giving advice, giving helpful advice, but actually helpful advice isn't helpful, or it's only helpful in very limited contexts. The first step is always just to welcome whatever's there. There was a course the other day when somebody, there was a woman in her, coming up to 40 who wasn't in a relationship. And someone said, oh, you really are lovable, you really are attractive. But that doesn't help. What you need to say is, I really get that there's a part of you that doesn't feel lovable and doesn't feel attractive, and that part of you is welcome. So it's rescuing to say, well, of course you're intelligent, or of course you're lovable. But actually it's healing when the part that has been exiled or neglected or avoided is actually given space to be seen, and then change can take place. And so sometimes in these small groups of three, you can get someone, saying, oh, I'm feeling really down, I'm feeling really depressed, and somebody else says, cheer up, it'll all be okay. And that isn't helpful. So hopefully you had a good experience. And I think it's really important that when we create a culture, when we create a field where it's such an important part of the healing process. I actually think healing in groups is even more powerful than one-to-one in some ways, because if you get a group of people who really, the whole group is saying to you, we get all your woundedness, we see all your woundedness, we love you, we can totally understand where that came from, you're not responsible for it, and we see what's great about you as well, and we believe in your natural flowering evolution process, and when there are no expectations that you need to grow or change. We love you just the way you are, but you're flowering, you're blossoming. That is so powerful when one's in a field of people that have that sense about you. It's what we've all longed for all of our lives, and unfortunately our families, very often, for perfectly good reasons, we're not very good at it. That's how a child grows. I use the example, it's a trivial example, but You know, in the police force, they don't use negative reinforcement. They don't use punishment anymore for dogs. When they're doing dog training, they use positive reinforcement. They use, you know, giving the dogs little biscuits. You know, if we only did that with our children, if we never punished them and we only looked at what was great about them, we ignored the bad behavior. I mean, obviously you're going to have to sometimes say, hey, it's not okay to do that. But the emphasis is on growing and supporting. That's what everybody needs. The focus on that. And most of us didn't get that. And that's what we can do for each other. You know, and say, oh yes, I see the place in you that's wounded and hurt, and there's much, much more to you than this. That's not only you. So anyway, we could talk more about this. We're actually running really short of time. There's one more thing I want to do, so not much chance for sharing. But I just wanted to say that next week, the topic, we're going to focus more on the resources. And I'm particularly interested in the resources that you really need for your healing process. So between now and next week, if you're coming next week, you know, really wonder about what are what is it? Is it God? Is it a saint? Is it the leader of a tradition? Is it a teacher? Is it Milton Erickson? Is it Gandhi? You know, is it someone from, you know, Gandalf, or someone from a childhood book, or what is the quality that you need to heal you in your life? And is it just to your own personal life, or is it transgenerational? That is to say, stuff that you've inherited from your ancestors or your culture, which is really nothing to do with you. I carry stuff in my body that is really nothing to do with me. It's to do with being a man born in 1955 in England. It has nothing to do with me personally, really, except it happens to be sitting in my body. And then, so that's what we're doing next week. And then just a slight change to the program. At 6 o'clock, those people who need to go will go. And those people who want to hear about the Life Talent program, level 1, which is 9 sessions, and level 2, which is 31 sessions, a whole year, there'll be 45 minutes between 6 and 6:45 to talk about that. But before we go, as it's 6 o'clock now, what I'd like to do is to unmute yourselves and just give us a word about how you're feeling right now.
Happy.
Present.
Curious.
Grateful.
Energized.
Welcomed.
Connect.
Say that again. Repeat that.
Connected.
Joyful.
Gratitude.
Caring.
Curious.
Relaxed.
Inspired.
Say that again, Georgian.
Inspired. I was going to say curious or perplexed, but
Happy.
Two hours, and we can feel each other. Yeah, great. Thanks a lot, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have
Thanks, Julian.
a good week.
Thanks, Julian.